Hi scholars, I wanted to make a brief video on the topic of visual aids. A visual aid can be anything that's used to help visually enhance the speech. But we want to remember that no matter what we use as a visual aid, the speech should not focus on that aid. It's a focus on you. You're the speaker. You're providing all of the good, interesting information. And your visual just provides something to illustrate what you're talking about. So the audience can not only hear what you're saying, but see something to back up what you're saying in a visual format. Most of the time, when we talk about visual aids in this day and age, we talk about PowerPoint presentations because they're the most commonly used type of visual aid. A lot of people use PowerPoints in business, and a lot of people use them unsuccessfully. Have you ever heard of death by PowerPoint? Being stuck in a meeting where this long, boring PowerPoint is shown and someone's just reading off the slides. That's not fun. And so we don't want to do that as professional speakers. And so here's a few things to keep in mind when you design and use a PowerPoint. I often get asked the question, well, how many slides do I need? For my class, and I believe for the business world as well, PowerPoints should be kept very simple. And so I suggest students use one slide for the introduction, one slide for each main point, and then one slide for a conclusion. So if you have 3 main points in your presentation, which is pretty typical, then you would have 5 slides. So what goes into the slides? Well, every slide, whether it's the title slide or the conclusion slide or a main point slide, every slide needs to have a title. And so your introduction slide would just have basically your topic if you want to ask a rhetorical question or just the topic title, however you want to phrase that. And some people like to include their names as the speaker. If you have a main point slide that you want to design, you want to make sure that you have the title across the top that deals with that topic of that main point. So that helps the audience follow your speech. And then the conclusion slide should also just have perhaps, it could be a repeat of your introduction slide, or it could perhaps just have another way of saying what your topic was, or some sort of summarizing photo to conclude your speech. In terms of other content on slides, we've got to be very careful. If our rule is to keep it simple, then we want to make sure that we don't overwhelm our audience with the visual. Do not have full sentences anywhere on your slides. Don't do it. Because what will happen is the attention turns from you and the audience starts reading from your slides. And in many cases, you might turn and start reading from your slides because there's the speech right there written out. So don't do that. Just avoid it. Instead, if you're going to put text content, do that in bullet pointed phrases or words. And I'm literally talking about 2 to 3 bullet points with maybe 2 to 3 words per line. That's really it. And then if it seems like that's not enough, if you want to put a nice picture over on the other side of that slide, that's fine. A good clear picture that's big enough, not pixelated, clear, and representative of what you're talking about. That would be sufficient. If you wanted just a title and a bigger picture, that's perfect too. You don't have to have text on your slides. Please don't put text over a picture. That's always kind of difficult to read the text. Don't do that. And also make sure that you don't get too wordy in your bullet points. So remember, keep it very, very brief. That's just to kind of give us the highlights and you provide the good information. I think the textbook has a rule called the 6x6 rule. And this is about as much text as I will allow. This rule says that you can have no more than 6 lines of bullet points on a slide and no more than 6 words per line. So that's the most that you should be putting on your slides. So also we want to think about color contrast, design, making sure nothing overlaps or gets rearranged for some reason. So you always want to check what kind of technology your speaking location has and whether or not it can read your version of PowerPoint. It seems like a small detail, but then you don't have to worry about your PowerPoint working or not on the day of your speech. It's always nice to test out your PowerPoint ahead of time. So how do we effectively use PowerPoint? Well, remember, It's not the focus, so you should not be focused on it. You're focusing on the audience. Your goal is to communicate to this group of people, and so you should most of the time be facing forward, all of the time really, be facing forward. A lot of times students get in this trap where they start looking over at their PowerPoint and then they start just turning and standing here, and they totally lose that connection that they have with their audience. So don't do that. Instead, only glance over at your PowerPoint if you're going to be pointing out something, perhaps on a chart or a graph, or if you just want to make sure you're on the right slide. As soon as you click it, just glance quickly and then always come back. But if you're doing anything more than that in terms of turning toward the PowerPoint, it's really becoming a distraction for you. And so you want to try to get in the habit of just facing forward all the time. Also want to make sure that we practice with our PowerPoint and get familiar as to when we would change our slides. And you do not want the first time you use your PowerPoint to be when you're speaking in front of the audience. And so always work out the issues, work out the problems beforehand in a practice session, and this will really reduce your nervousness. All right, so we've talked a little bit about PowerPoints as visual aids, how to design them effectively, how to use them effectively. These are things you definitely want to keep in mind when you use PowerPoint as a visual aid for not only this class, but for future presentations.